everybody. And then today we're going to talk about bioswales with Sydney.
Yeah.
So I don't think Sydney needs any introduction, but you can always introduce yourself, Sydney. So
Yeah, I will do that with my presentation.
yeah,
So then I will share my screen, of course.
and for everybody who's wondering, don't they speak Dutch? Yes, we do, but we have some international people that were quite interested in the story of Sydney and the bioswales in Nijmegen. So we're gonna do this in English.
Yeah, I prepared it in English really quick today. So I will have the slides in English, talk in English, but we will have a mix sometimes for the questions. We will talk Dutch for a while. All right. Well, really nice to be presenting on this climate cafe for myself for a change. I'm Sidney Stax. Short introduction. I'm from the Netherlands, municipality of Nijmegen, which is a bit to the south of the Netherlands. And have a background in ecology, but also in civil water engineering. I'm working for the engineering department of our municipality, mainly on water and water quality also. So that's also why I'm doing a topic on bioswales. I've organized this climate cafe with Floris Bogert for a long time now, and we actually started, that's a nice bridge to this topic, actually started, we first met each other when this project started on researching the soils of bioswales. And it was a big research. It was funded by the government. With can you see my cursor by the way? No, I don't hear
Yes.
anybody.
No,
Yes.
no,
Okay.
yes,
Oh,
we
yeah.
do. Yeah,
All
sorry,
right.
I was muted. Yeah.
Which is the Deltaplan ruimtelijke adaptatie. Klimaatadaptatie is yeah almost the same in English. Delta Plan Spatial Adaptation, I think. And then from climate change, we got some money to do some research. And I met Floris Bogart because he was, of course, doing research on bioswales and with a quite a new technology that could measure metal pollutants in the soil. So yeah, that's how we know and actually how this whole climate cafe online started. And now we're a few years later. This year we're going to do our last measurements, and I will present you the results from two measurement years over the past almost 5 years. So what we see here are also the other groups that are taking part of it. It's also funded by the province. We work with the Climate Adaptation Service, which is mainly on communication about this topic. Rionet, which is the Dutch sewer pipes company, of a company, knowledge institution, knowledge institution, and STOA is more of the knowledge institution on the water in a broader sense. And here are some of the companies that are involved, which is Tau, of course, which did the messages, but also Sweco, which has guided us to a story map, which I also going to present at the end of this presentation. And lastly, there is a community of practice that I started also about 5 years ago, I think, which was mainly about um, permeable pavement, but it's expanded now to infiltration. There's all kinds of infiltration, so permeable pavement, but also bioswales, infiltration, sewer pipes, all kinds of things. And this topic also came back to that community of practice. All right. So what are we going to talk about? I already explained a little bit, but it's mainly about the pollutants in the bioswale soil. And why do I say it like this? Because you can measure the runoff of the water, and of course pollutants in that, and you could also measure the effluent out of the bioswale if you have the facilities for that. So that will be the perfect purified water, but we didn't do that. We just measured the pollutants in the soil. I'm going to present the results of that, talk a bit about the research over the years, and also some practical things we encountered and tackled. The possibility of pollutant sources. It was not the goal of this research, but I couldn't help myself to try to analyze something about that. So I'm going to present a little bit about that. And the main goal is an advice for the maintenance of the bioswales, mainly on the soil, but also the design of bioswales. So a little bit of extra knowledge. What are the pollutants that we are looking at? Are mainly the metals. This, for the ones that still know a little bit of chemistry, will recognize some of these letters. And the importance of it is well, there are multiple importance of the pollution in the bioswales, but one of them is the excretion to aquatic biotopes or to our drinking water, of course. But another one is the soil itself. It has to maintain a quality that is not harmful to the people that are using it or animals are using it. And I will talk a little bit about, I already mentioned that, the possible pollutants. And this is a little hint where some pollutants might come from. So the surface runoff water, surface runoff water. The question that was always asked is clean enough? Well, the answer quickly is could be yes, but no, because it could be pollutant because of the surface that the water runs off through. Like for cars or companies that have waste or just people that litter, there's always some pollutant on surfaces that are being used, especially when they're used by humans and intensively used. And these are some of the pollutants that we're talking about. So here you see some of the metals, and we're looking at copper, lead, and zinc in this research mainly, but we also did some lab analysis, which said something about mineral oil, PCBs, OCBs, and there are other substances that's also important, but we're not going to talk about it today. And these are the PFASs or the microplastics or other many upcoming pollutants, sadly many, but we focus on 3 metals. So if you want to know more about that, Flores, which is present today, has done a lot of research on it together with some other scientists and have made great databases from it. And I used the Dutch database that said something about the averages pollutants you can find in runoff water. But that's just a little background for what the pollutants in runoff water could be. And if you want to know more about that, you can download those databases. So how does pollution get into the bioswales? Well, of course, with the runoff water, but how does the pollution ends up in the bioswale soil? Well, just a little, most people here know how it works, but I will repeat it anyway. Water from the surface runs off to the bioswale with the rainwater, and then in the soil, it can be bound, which is mainly total suspended solids, so little particles that are in the water, fine particles that you sometimes can see, actually often can see, that are being filtered to the soil. And that's also why most of the pollutants ends up on the top layer of the soil. But there is also water of pollution that are, ik kan even niet op het woord komen, opgelost. Nou,
Solved.
solved. Yeah, these are solved. Yeah,
Sorry.
solved.
Yeah.
Yeah, solved in water. And thank you, Flores.
Yeah.
Solved in the water, so they're not bound to fine particles, but they can be catched through biochemical or geochemical soil processes. For instance, cation exchange, which is an ion exchange, and which is possible because metals are positively charged. Or substance can also be catched when they're negatively charged, but that's a complex story. We didn't really look into those processes. We only measured what do we find in the soil. And there is also a lot of research about extraction by plants, hypoaccumulating plants that can purify the soil from metals, but this is mainly in other situations with other types of plants. And the research on how extraction by plants in bioswales is still kind of limited, but still interesting, but the possibilities could be high, but we don't know that. Oh, this is a bit of Dutch, but the question here is how much stays in the soil? And that was the main question that we were asking. So yeah, the main goal, I'm working for the municipality. So what do they want to know? They want to know like how polluted is the soil? Do we need um, to renovate, remediate the soil, which could mean that we have to extract all the soil and replace it with clean soil or do another process that cleans the soil. But our municipality was like, yeah, we don't know where this is the case and how big is the issue, on what kind of pollutants are we talking about? Is it the whole bioswale or just a part? So we needed knowledge about this just to go into the field and work directly on the bioswale soil. So it's not really a research question. It's really a question of maintenance that we have to do, and in some cases right now. I will talk about that later. Well, we couldn't measure everything. So we focused on three metals, and the reason for that was at that time, Tao said, well, these three metals are pretty good to measure with a new technology, the portable XRF scanner. I will talk about it a little bit later. But they also could be used as indicators for other pollutants. And over the years, I asked a lot of other researchers if this is the case. And well, if they are present, then it's a good indicator. But if they're not present, that doesn't mean that there aren't other pollutants. So it's an indicator, but yeah, you can only use it to determine if there are pollutants, but not really the other way around. So we can use those measurements to determine where we need to take action right away, but also to make a management plan for the longer term and maybe even redesign bioswales in order to make them more effective or to get less pollutants. The research question that I made were, are standards in a soil being exceeded? So we have standards in the Netherlands and a warning standard and an intervention norm or standard. And if they are exceeded, then we have to take action within a few years, mostly because there are some health risks. Another question that we had at the time is there a relationship between the quantities in the soil, the concentrations, and time? We expect that the older our bioswale is, the more pollutants it got over time. So then you expect high concentrations. But I was like, well, okay, how quick um, how quick does the pollution concentration goes up? That would be really nice because then you could make of it to know because you can make a management plan and say, well, in like I don't know, 5 years, 20 years, or 30 years, you need to go back to a place because you expect that at that time the standards are exceeded again. Another question is there a relationship between the quantities that we found and the environment? And this is the surroundings, the pollutant sources, what I was talking about before. And the portable XRF scanner, I will show a picture of it later, was relatively new at the time. So we also had the question, well, is this really a good method? And we checked that by doing lab analysis which were commonly used and already credited and accepted as good methods. And we compared the values to the XRF scanner to the lab analysis. I won't show results of that. I could if there are questions about it, but I can answer this question really quickly. The measurements for the three metals we measured are practically the same as from the lab results. So this question is already answered pretty quick. It's a really good method to use. Now, what does this mean for maintenance and design is a research question, but also for the municipality. So what did we do? We looked at 4 locations in Nijmegen. And we chose 4 relatively different locations. It was actually based on the age. I made the selection based on age. And what was really cool is that we actually got 4 different parts of the Nijmegen because they were made in really different years. So I accidentally may also choose 4 different typologies of the city, different kind of areas because I looked at the years. And I go to the first bioswale as an example of what our results are. This is the Mercuriusstraat bioswale. Still a little bit in Dutch. It is in this area over here. It's relatively new, even though it's in the city center, but that's because this park, there's this park right here, has been made, I think 2011. Actually, I'm not sure. But they're relatively young because it's a redeveloped area. As you can already see here, there's a big road next to it, a big road with a lot of traffic, and I'll go into that later. So we did in this bioswale, what we did is take the soil samples on the commonly accepted method, which we sent later to the lab. But we also used the PXRF scanner, which looked like this. And it's really cool because you just use it, you shoot on the ground with electrons. It's more like a Röntgen device. You get a result right away. You have to calibrate it a bit with moisture percentages, but it's a quick way to have results on those pollutants. How did we do that? We did it by extracting the soil like this. So we laid out the soil profile on the ground. Actually, we did it with a material under it because then we get better results with the PXRF scanner. But this way we can take measurements over different soil layers. At the beginning of this research, we actually just took 5 centimeters above the soil. We scraped a bit of green away, and then took a sample. But later on, it was actually quite quick. We went to this method by just using the soil profile like this and put it on the ground. So in this bioswale, here you can see the results. They're not clear, I know, but what you can see is that there's only one place where we have a red and, well, I'm colorblind, but I think this is orange color, which indicate that there are intervention values are exceeded, or a warning value, which is orange, has been reached. And what's interesting about this is that we see that on one point, there are higher concentrations, on the other points, luckily, they were very low. It's really good that they were low because we had a tiny forest here, which was maintained by some children for a time. Now there are no exceeding concentrations here, and actually in this part, it wasn't really well maintained. There are a lot of bushes, so nobody goes here. So that was nice to know. But what was interesting is that the most water that's coming into this bioswale all comes from this direction. So that actually is aligned with research by Floris Bogart, which showed that at the entry points of the bioswales are the main parts that are pollutant. So that's nice that we saw that Floris was right. At least this data partly confirms his data, to put it in a more scientific way.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. But I wanted to go a little bit deeper into that, not into the soil. We actually went a half meter deep and took 3 layers. First 5 centimeters, then I think 5 to 20, and then 20 to 30 centimeters. And we tried to find differences in the layers, but the results were pretty clear that the highest concentration was always found in the highest layer, except for one case with OCB, I think. But it was really one case on its own. So we can use the measurements, the results from the top layers, the first 5 to 10. Sometimes we took 10 centimeters deep, as a great indication on how the soil quality is and how large these concentrations occur. So here I have the bioswale again, and here we have it more in its surrounding area. And as you can see, this is the bioswale. These are some pipes that are the entry points, and you can see the roads. They all water to this bioswale. Some water gets in other bioswales first, and later in this bioswale we measured. So I actually want to go back to these bioswales sometimes to measure what the concentrations are in those, because they could be higher, but I'm not sure because the water comes from different directions. But still, this one is really good because the most water comes at the end, comes in this one bioswale. I also looked at the surface runoff, and it's a pretty weird sketch because I had to use many different um, 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 many different designs for the water system to really figure out what the runoff surface was, but it was quite big. It was about, this is still in Dutch, but it's about 3 hectares of intensively used road that run off to this bioswale. Um, and we had another one like that. It's not really, yeah, it's not really easy to see, but we have a bioswale right here, and there is only 1.4 hectares of high intensity, but there's also a train traffic which waters down to the bioswales. And we had measurements, we have done measurements in that bioswale as well, of course. It's this one over here. And as you can see, the water is coming from different directions again. From the train track, it actually goes down the hill. We actually don't know exactly, but into one bioswale first, and then it goes to this one. These are also connected in a way. So it's really unclear how the water exactly flows, but what we saw is that the concentrations were even higher than the last bioswale we just saw. So we don't really have an exact explanation for it, but there are many more surrounding factors that could, and I say could because we don't know for sure, but that could explain those higher pollutants. This is also the bioswale where we see more red. You can't see it really well, but the last red part is for zinc. The first is for copper, which means this bioswale has quite a lot of copper and zinc pollution. Luckily, lead, we didn't find much high concentrations, actually never the exceedance of the intervention value of lead. And our soil department was really happy because lead is the most important one in the case of health risks. So they were really glad that we didn't find exceedance of that. But still, copper could be harmful, and zinc is harmful to aquatic organisms. So we still have to do something about it, and we're going to do something about it for this one. So those were 2 bioswales, but we actually measured 15 bioswales in total. And here we tried, it's still a bit in Dutch, but we tried to put them on a scale of years to compare if we see that the oldest bioswales have the highest pollution. And what's really easy to see right away is that not the oldest, oh, that's too quick, not the oldest bioswales has the highest pollution. In fact, some older bioswales, these are about 13, maybe 15 by now, years old, had actually quite low values. They didn't even reach the warning value for zinc. And we have one older bioswale that had a higher value for lead, but that place was actually a pit before it was a bioswale. So I don't know for sure, but it could be really old ground that has been polluted for many more years in the times that lead was commonly used in, for instance, gasoline, but mainly paint in the surrounding houses. It's a possible explanation. I'm not sure, but I don't think it's a coincidence that this bioswale, which wasn't a bioswale before, is the most polluted. But still, the the conclusion is an indicative conclusion I make is that the oldest bioswale doesn't have to be the most polluted. In fact, this is one of the younger bioswales, 7 years, and that's a pretty high zinc pollution. So then I was thinking, and then I was like, yeah, what could be another relation? And I already talked about the surface runoff area. So I wanted to see if there is maybe a relation between that. And what I found is that the highest runoff areas also showed the highest pollutant values. As you can see, the Prince Maurits single, which was the one with the most pollution, is the middle highest from these three and has the highest pollution value. And the Mercuriusstadt, which is the first bioswale we saw, it has really the highest surface area runoff, and also one of the highest pollutants. But not always. You can see that with a less large area, you could actually have more pollutants. So that could be the intensity or another source. But it's still really interesting, especially because what was actually this? Oh yeah, especially because in a later year we measured at the Zulstraat also quite a high polluted for copper, and that's actually the fourth largest area, surface runoff area. So it's not conclusive, but it's the indication that the surface runoff area could be used to determine possible pollutions. So I went a little bit deeper in that and tried to make a correlation analysis of that, just really basic R regression analysis. You don't have to understand these graphs or anything. The only thing what I'm showing here is that we have a correlation value that is actually the highest, the steepest with that goes up when the surface area goes up. So we see that the pollutants go up if the surface area goes up. And I actually found that there is a correlated value that has been seen in the statistical science as usable, mostly, in some cases even strong, in other cases not really strong. I also used this to determine if roof or road was the most important. And what I found, I saw less correlations with the roof area, surface area, and more correlations with the road area. And it differs per pollutant, which is quite, it's the thing you would expect, because copper and zinc are usually found in car tires or car parts, and lead less. Or at least they are found in cars, lead, but the runoff is lower. And that's also what we see in the correlation. Now, some people might say, well, but you can also have like a soil type with a high lutum or organic value. That could explain why you have more metals in the ground, because then they bind more to the ground. So I did a correlative analysis actually of copper, lead with organic values and also with lutum. And actually what I found is that those correlations are pretty weak if you enter the highest found concentrations of metals and of metals in the rain. If you took them out, it was really nice. Then you see a correlation again with the soil type and the kind of pollutants that are bound to the soil. So I mentioned already that we measured in a few other years. So we have 2021, which was the first measurement year, and 2023. The strange thing that we found was not that we found things we totally didn't understand. We still see that there are bioswales with the highest values, the highest concentrations, which also were the highest in 2001. However, these are the results from 2003. And if you can remember, maybe I can come back really quick. Yeah, this picture is quite different. Some parts are the same, but still different. And what's mainly was different is that some higher values were not found in 2023. Now, there could be a lot of explanations for it, because you never measure the same part of the soil exactly. However, the differences are quite great with the lower concentrations. You can see with the higher concentrations, you can still see that those higher concentrations are found in the next year. We're going to measure this year again, so I'm really curious. If it's totally different than this, then I have a problem. But at least I hope to see some of these higher results again. But for the lower results, yeah, it will be, we will see. So I talked a little bit about where we come from, and I mentioned tires from cars already. Zinc is commonly used in making tires, and it also, yeah, when a tire is used, it gets worn off, and little particles of it with zinc and also a bit with copper comes off it, and they go into the rainwater and the runoff surface water into the biosphere. And that's actually what we saw. The train track could be a possible explanation for the higher copper values that I find. I say could be because I don't know exactly how the water gets into the biosphere. Therefore, we have to do some measurements or some maybe even just go outside and look better how the water flows. But it could be a possible explanation. And the last explanation is zinc that is used in these kind of rain pipes, and that would explain the higher zinc concentrations that we found at one area where we had a high roof surface area instead of a high road surface area. Could be, but as we know, it's not known if everyone has a zinc rainwater pipe like this anymore. So if we want to know for sure, we have to get more information about that, but we don't have that yet. What I think was quite interesting for the Netherlands is that there has been done research on surface runoff water and also the parts of the soil at the sides of the road. I don't know the English word for it. But they did a lot of
road
research.
verges.
Road
verges, yeah.
Verges, yeah, road verges. They did a lot of research on it, and they say, well, there is a difference between surface of a roof runoff water, and there is a difference between that and a combination of roof and road water. And what we try to research or try to do in this research is looked at the roof and the roads separately. So we come to different conclusions about that. And what we see is that there is quite a difference between surface area from roofs. And if you take the area from only roads, then you see quite big differences. But still, roofs can be a source of pollution depending on the type of roof. Which also actually a nice thing to mention is that a student of mine has found that the temperature plays an important role in the release of the metals into the rainwater. So that could also be a thing to use in the future to regulate this pollution more. And of course the roads, yeah, we have seen a lot of presentations already on the surface runoff of roads, and I think it's safe to conclude that a lot of pollutions can come from there. So that's the knowledge that we acquired through these measurements. Well, we have the relation, an indicative relation, I should say, because it's not scientifically proved, an indicative relation to the amount of surface, the type of surface, and the places you expect high concentrations, as mentioned in the bioswales as shown. So no relation between the age and concentration. I say yet because we have 1 year to go. So maybe we will see actually in the next measurement that there is a relation, or you just have to measure over longer time periods and then you can see a relation. So actually what I say here is wrong because we don't know if there is a relation. At least this data doesn't show there is a relation over age. This we can say the highest concentration at entry points or outry points, also where the biospheres have an escape. And what I find that some of those escapes had also a higher concentration. So that's pretty interesting to look at maybe later. Well, we can say the XRF scanner is a good method because the lab results were practically the same. And what we can do with this knowledge already is select surfaces that we expect pollutants from, and then use that to determine the amount of pollution that goes with the water to the bioswales. And we know that for one bioswale exceeded the exceeded the concentration standards, the intervention standards many times. So we have to do something about it. And we're in another bioswale, two other bioswales that only one measurement point in the bioswale has exceeded the intervention values. And for those bioswales, we still are discussion about what to do if we have to take action to the whole bioswale or just a part. In contrast of the law, we don't have to do anything if it's only one small point that is polluted. So those are a bit of a discussion bioswales, but at least for one, we know we have to do something about it. And of course, we were really glad that lead was not the issue, because if we have found higher concentration of lead above the intervention values, then we had to take more action and sooner. This is Nalle in Dutch, but it was, oh yeah, this part is in Dutch text. So I'm sorry for English watchers. I will try to translate it as good as possible. What are we going to do with this knowledge exactly? Well, I'm going to give my advice for maintenance on the long run. So the management for bioswales. We say now, don't look at the age of the bioswale per se. Of course, a really old bioswale, you should take that in account. But mainly, you'll first look at the locations. What are the possible pollutant sources? And not just look at the surface area. I would look at that first, but then also how much water could actually run off to those bioswales. And you could do a modeling study or measurement on the water flows on that. Well, the measurements are pretty hard to do, but it's the first way to look at your possible pollutant, possible most pollutant bioswales. Yeah, that's quite, like I mentioned, do a source analysis, but also use the type of the roofs, and the traffic intensity seems to be pretty important. Even though our government said there was no relation, I think it probably is. Use the XRF scanner, the portable XRF scanner. It's a really good method. You have really quick results. One thing we learned during this research was that we have to be in contact with the field, the people in the field, because if they found high values, then we actually need more measuring points around it. We didn't do that in the first year, and in the second year only, we found this only during the measurements. But in the last year, we're going to really explicitly instruct those people that if you find a high value, even if you didn't validate it yet, please contact us and we do a little bit more sampling. Like Floris also found in his research, some bioswales are polluted really quickly. Next to the source, the biggest source of pollutions, we found some young bioswales that already had some increased values after 2 years of measuring. But others only increased after 5 to 10 years. So what can we do with this knowledge? Well, you have to go and check some of the bioswales pretty soon if you expect high pollutions. Probably we're going to do a partly sanitation, or how do you say it, saneren or remediation of the soil. Now that's not also good. We're going to partly excavate the soil to replace it with clean soil around the entry points, instead of the whole bioswale. We're not conclusive about this yet, but that's probably how we're going to handle those places. Now, the XRF scanner is a good method. I will mention that. Yeah, I also did this presentation for my municipality, and there I have that the cleaning of the soil, the action that has been taken is determined by a different department than the water department. It's the soil department. Well, that makes sense probably. What I also thought of is that we could use this knowledge to make a different design. This is not implemented yet. These are just ideas, but if we expect quick pollution at the entry points of bioswales, then maybe we should take a bit more care in making those areas not available. But I don't want to make a whole bioswale unavailable to people to enjoy. So maybe we could think of a method to design bioswales in a way that the entry points are less reachable or not reachable by people and that the water can later flow out to the rest of the bioswale. So that part of the bioswale will pollute less quick, and we don't have to keep people from that part. That also gives indications that the pollutant might be steerable. So we can make a place in the bioswale that's lower than the rest, or with a small canal in the bioswale that we can steer the pollutant to the place we want. And then we also know that those are the places that are expected to have the most of the highest pollution the quickest. So then even before the bioswale is there, we already know where in the bioswale we can expect the problems and take action sooner. But those are just ideas. And that's actually not true, because one idea is already being implemented right now, and that's this one. And that is that we actually made a bioswale within a retention basin. And then we have one part, as you can see here, that is the bioswale. That's the place where we got all the water, the water from the smaller rainfall events. But if we have a bigger rainfall events, bigger parts of the retention basin can overflow. And we were like, yeah, it's no use to say that people or can't go here, or we have to get rid of these plants because it has to be like a bioswale that has to be accessible for maintenance. We were like, no, we choose one part that has a high infiltration value and the pollutants can flow there. So we know this part gets polluted more quickly, but the other parts, we expect that not a lot of pollutants reach there, because this is only inundated when we have like a rain event in 1 or 50 years, or 100 years. So then we still have a large rotation area, but we don't have to treat it like a bioswale in its whole. And that creates possibility for use and green and other stuff. Well, yeah, this is a small explanation on how to for the maintenance department, the management of the bioswales, how to do their next measurements. We call them, yeah, we call them here inspections of the bioswale, but they're basically measurements, the same as we did. That you select an area that what you want to research, and then also select the possible runoff areas, so you know that some places have a high risk of pollution and a lower risk of pollution. Then if after you select them, you do the research. And even though the XRF scanner is very good, I recommend lab research to validate your results, but also because lab results produce more results on other pollutants like mineral oil, PCBs, or microplastics if you want. An XRF scanner can do that. Well, if you find those pollutants, you have to you have to clean the soil in some way. And you have to do the groundwater research, groundwater measurements, because the bioswale could be full, or at least a lot of pollutants in wait, that's a really complex thing to explain. It could be that the bioswale soil isn't taking out much pollutants anymore, and some will go through the bioswale soils. And we don't know that for sure yet, but if we find high concentrations, I want to do groundwater research lower, and then we'll see if the bioswale is less functioning when it's full of pollutants. I don't expect it per se, because the most pollutants are catched at the top layer, probably 90 to 99%. And if you go 1 meter under the bioswale, you expect barely any pollutants, at least for metal pollutants. Now, another thing you can do with those measurements is try to improve the design. That's what I mentioned about the inflow, the entry parts. You can maybe change it. If needed, even put a fence around it. I wouldn't recommend it. But you could use this to partly redesign your bioswale instead of getting rid of your bioswale or clean it totally. So don't think too big, and don't panic if you find these pollutants. There are a lot of ways to handle it. And repeat the research. We found that the results differed in only 2 years, so 2 years between the measurements. And that means that one measurement could give not enough. Yeah, it could be that there's not enough information from 1 year of measuring. We recommend for the municipalities to repeat it at least 5 to 10 years, kind of depending at the risk you're expecting, but not only to find pollutants that exceed the intervention values, but also to validate what you found. Well, if you find a high value and 5 years later only low values, that means there's something strange happening. And you should know that. It could also be the other way around, and that's of course more riskful. And this is in Dutch, but I want to thank you very much. And I'm really over time, I see.
Yeah, that was not 20
What?
minutes.
No,
But it's okay, right? Yeah.
we
No,
started a
great.
bit later, so that's excuse I
Exactly.
have.
Yeah. No, it's a great presentation. Maybe comments or questions, or shall I give it a go?
I
Yeah,
have a few
but
questions.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
right.
You mentioned, I really like the idea of a bioswale inside of a retention pond or a detention basin or whatever. That makes a lot of sense. But I wanted to ask, you said at both the entry and outlet points, the water quality was bad.
Yeah, I found I think 2 occasions where the outlet points had higher concentration, not above the intervention values, but higher than the rest of the bioswale. Yes.
So would that be at points in instances where the capacity of the bioswale has been exceeded and during that specific event, water is going out at the outlet, or is it designed in such a way that there's a permanent outflow as well?
Yeah, I think that well, I don't know because I didn't validate this question with any data or research method. But what I think is that at the outflow points here, the ground is a little bit lower and also a little bit
Oh,
it has less vegetation on it. Those are the only possible explanations I have right now for those locations.
yeah,
So it's just that the water flows there, stands still, because it's a point where the water goes.
yeah,
It's actually
interesting.
similar to the inflow points because there we often have a little bit of erosion that gets a little bit of deeper points. It's already the deepest points of the bioswale quite often, which
Ah,
is also an explanation for the higher pollutions. It's not necessarily the distance it has to take, but the height, of course, is
yeah,
more important.
yeah. I can imagine maybe also under the force of gravity,
Yeah.
the lower points, there must be a whole kind of circulation of water and contaminants around the different levels.
Yes.
So that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
And then my last question, you said the soil department takes care of cleaning the soil, but do they do that through soil washing, or what kind of process do they
I
normally
actually
use?
have no idea what they're going to use. I think it's also really in development. There are a lot of new ways to clean the soil by cleaning, but that's often quite complex, still
Yeah,
also a little bit expensive, and more, perhaps not necessarily, but the logistics are also quite hard. You have to get a lot of equipment to a place, and it's often really more easy just to take the soil out, export it to another place where it's maybe being used for something else. But we don't even know that as a municipality. Often we just pay some people to get rid of the soil and get new soil.
yeah, great. Thank you. That was a really nice presentation.
All right. I
Nice.
know you have a lot of questions, Floris.
Yeah, no,
But which one do you have right now? Yeah.
yeah, no. I think it's a great that you do research from a municipality perspective. That's really good because not a lot of research is being done because a lot of municipalities don't want to know. Because if you know, you have to do something about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's really a compliment. And I think
Actually,
the
that actually
results.
was
Yeah,
almost a reason that we didn't do it, and I
exactly.
was like, This is not
Yeah,
a reason, this is a
yeah,
fear," and
yeah.
and then people were like, "Ah, you're right, let's do it."
Yeah.
So
No, and I think because you choose some locations that are quite, with roads, and they age, so you actually know you're gonna find something, and it was quite okay. I think at locations as well that you can expect. It confirms a lot of research what's out there. Of course, there are
yeah,
always strange things, especially the difference.
yeah,
You expect more pollution after a couple of years, but also at the first location, Enschede, the first. Swill implementation, large scale in the Netherlands. Also, we had a variation,
yeah.
not too much, but you never you never go to the same point, and sometimes you don't know what's happening. Sometimes
Did
there
you
was
did you
maintenance. Yeah,
how much in how much years approximately did you measure actually in Enschede?
6 years. Yeah, and there
6. Oh,
was
right.
also some really high, but some lower. So basically, it means you have to. That's the good point with the XRF. You can put it
Yeah,
at different places, so you can see if you have a high value, put it next to it, and then you have a high value again, so it's okay.
yeah,
And sometimes you just stumble on something. I mean, that's also with
yeah.
hydraulics, wormholes. There's a lot of variation in time, and so that's quite normal. Yeah, the only thing is, of course, when the difficulty with research is that you sometimes don't know everything about the location. I hear you
Yeah.
say there are also some swales. I don't know if the water goes there. That those things shouldn't be in research, of course. That's
Yeah.
but that's quite easy to when it rains, maybe go out there and see what actually happens. That
Yeah,
could
but then we could do that, but the problem is that what I found at which is actually the case for any hydraulic location in a biosphere, you don't know exactly how much water enters
no,
at some point. If
yeah,
it's a diffuse pathway, or even with many more different pipes. I mean, I can still see, but at a different rainfall event, those flows could have a different um,
yeah,
are different upon each other as well.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, you can watch, you can determine like the most important routes, which actually I put some students on right now on that location. Like, oh, you go watch
yeah.
and determine those, but it's still indicative. I think it's really hard
Yeah, exactly. It's
to put
only
an
in
exact
the
value on it.
yeah. I'm just mentioning because we're gonna publish this, right? You want to publish this, so
We're gonna try
then
to, yeah.
yeah, no, that's gonna be working out
It's
as
gonna be
well. But if
hard,
you
but I
yeah,
think we don't, and it's maybe interesting for the other people. Um, I can't publish this on like the correlations with the surface area. It's just not enough
exactly,
data. And as I heard as Floris said, there are too many uncertainties to say like, yeah, this surface area with this water flows results in higher values.
yeah,
Even if we can't make an exact number like this area goes to that much pollution, but only the relationship is already too too weak to make a scientific paper of it. But what we can
yeah,
do is publish the results in the soil, and that we can see like, yeah, if we just look at the soil and take these other factors and area out of the equation, what can we
yeah,
say about it then? And then we can still validate some previous research done by Floris and other people about bioswales. So that's what we're going
yeah.
to try to do, and hopefully they accept it.
Yeah, and absolutely it helps. More research, more data, and
Yeah.
also where you ended, what you're gonna do about it. Where's
Yeah,
the soil gonna go? Is it chemical waste?
Mhm.
Are you gonna
Yeah.
clean the whole swale? Are you just gonna do the inlet? I
yeah,
mean, that from a municipality perspective is quite
yeah.
nice. It
Maybe
was
new
actually,
purification before the water enters the
yeah,
bioswale. We're also talking about that, especially in groundwater protected areas. This is a discussion. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, and there's only one maybe parameter because there are a lot of parameters that influence the behavior of pollutants. That's the storage volume of the swales. It's
yeah,
not only the connected area, but also if you have a small swale, it's likely more to pollute than a relatively bigger swale with the same connected. So we could play around with that as well, but I wouldn't do too much about it. And there's always one thing: there was no baseline study, and also in the research I did, nobody did.
And that's
bother
actually why.
to.
But that's why I think this research was really helpful, because we took like 5 swales that were only there for about like 1 year or 2 years. And well, they are not exactly base studies, but we can see it as still as a basically base study. For those, I hope that this data will be preserved and could be used in the 10 years for those swales. That will be really interesting.
Yeah, nice. No, that's great. I think especially the perspective for other municipalities. You talked about a treatment train, maybe have a closed, maybe sedimentation happens at the inlet, let it sediment and refresh that instead of being able to remove the whole soil of the swale. These are and make it inaccessible. And it could also be very simple with higher plants, higher vegetation. So that's it's really great. Absolutely. Yeah, nice.
Thank you. Well, I don't have much time, but actually this whole story is published online already, where you can find all the data at exactly every point that we measured. And I'm just going to show this really quick. You can see my screen again, I think.
Yeah.
If you look, you can Google Nijmegen body. Wait, it should work.
Yeah, and otherwise we put the link.
Yeah, we're gonna do that anyway, but I show it here. This is the data already. You have the bioswales, and they didn't add the names in it. That's pretty. Let's find if we have one that we just add in the presentation.
And that's all open source online.
This is all open source online, and you can switch through the different pollutants and the different layers. Here's the Prince Maurits single that we found in. Oh, this is wrong.
Wow.
That we found, and you can look like, oh, right here. This what's this point? Well, this is heavily polluted. That one there wasn't heavily polluted, and you can find it all here. And if you are like, yeah, that's all fun and games, but I don't know what's it about. I'm not a soil scientist. Well, I'm not either, but then you can go to Wadis Nijmegen research bioswales, and you can probably find on Google this site. It's also open source, and you can also find some infiltration measurements that we did with the students. And they say, in short, this is the way how we did the research. And then after that, they actually explain it in quite detail how a bioswale works, which is always interesting. They made nice pictures like this, but also why we did the research, what knowledge questions we had, what are the locations again. And it goes on quite a bit. Some student research from students from school Larenstein. They also put results of that. They measured the infiltration at playgrounds. So you can find that as well. And then there's the part on the soil. Yeah, these are the better pictures from the soil samples they took, and they with the XRF scanner they took later. So
wow.
Well, yeah, it's a lot of information. I thought they made it a little bit shorter actually, but I think I probably sent them also 10 times the amount of this information, and they already made it a lot smaller. So you can find everything about this research online.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I think Antal already put links to it on ClimateScan. Yeah, so you can actually go to ClimateScan, go to these bioswales, and then there is a link to this story map already.
Yeah, because a Wadi fan goes to ClimateScan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Nice.
All
right.
Perfect.
Ja.
Was voor mij totaal nieuw, want ik ben daar geen expert. Maar het was hier gewoon in het land. Het was onderzoek gedaan door bureau Raap, archeologisch onderzoek naar de bodem. En we zitten dus rond dat waterwindgebied. Ja, sorry that saying in Dutch if you don't mind.
Maakt niet uit. Ja, dat is niet zo erg.
Door het bodemonderzoek bleek dat, dat het water naar de beschermde zone van het drinkwatergebied zou gaan. Dus daarom is het water alleen het water van de daken van onze kant mocht die kant op. En de wadis moesten het water juist wegleiden van het waterwingebied. Maar ik weet niet eens of er ooit onderzoek is gedaan naar hoe vies. Ik weet niet of hier ooit onderzoek is gedaan. Dus het is meer een landschappelijke oplossing. Dus daarom vond ik het heel interessant om jouw verhaal te horen, Sidney.
Nou, maar dat is denk ik het leuke van die wadis ook. Floris doet het al wat langer natuurlijk, maar het is een onderwerp wat is bedacht. Het is geïmplementeerd en eigenlijk vervolgde het onderzoek van hoe werken ze nou echt, qua vervuiling in ieder geval, pas later. Dus het is precies, het is vaak zo gegaan als jij zegt, en nu komen we dus veel meer tot de inzichten van, oh ja, die vervuiling, daar kunnen we eigenlijk veel meer mee. En andere oplossingen en andere ontwerpen voor bedenken. Maar dan moet je wel wat onderzoek doen, ja, zoals dit. Ja.
Absolutely.
Mooi.
Yeah.
Nou, heel erg bedankt.
Yeah. So the last part was in Dutch, but it was all about do more research, as researchers mostly say. So what are we gonna do next week, Sidney?
Actually, I'm not sure. I think we have a problem for the first time in almost 4 years.
No, I think we're gonna. Oh, you don't see
this.
Oh,
we already have.
It was a PhD defense last week in Sweden, and I asked. It's not confirmed yet, so I will not say his name. But probably we're gonna go to Sweden and Ohio to see what kind of results are there with bio infiltration. 6 years of research, so that might be nice, and then we have a series.
Nice,
yeah.
Have a nice trip.
Yeah, well, I'm not going there, but we're gonna virtually take that trip.
Yeah. Okay.
So no, that's gonna be nice. Yeah, and thanks again, Sidney, for a great presentation.
Yeah.
And I think, hopefully see you next week.
Hopefully
have a great evening.
And after that, we have the constructed wetlands, right?
Yeah, with Katarina.
That is
from Germany.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
See you then.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Yeah.